And I think Joanna will hand it off to you to go to the agenda and get us started.
Okay, good thing I unmuted myself. So our first presentation today, I've got my agenda way on the other side of my computer here. Hang on a second. Otherwise, I'm looking far away. It's our DRCOG 2050 MetroVision Regional Transportation Plan. And I'm not sure who, here we go with, I'm not sure who's presenting first, Jacob or Lisa, but let's go from there. And
I think they're gonna tag team, and Lisa was gonna share your screen if you are able to, Lisa.
That's what I thought, so I wasn't sure. Okay, so welcome and go forth.
All right, thanks, Joanna. Hi, everybody. My name is Lisa Hood. I am the Public Engagement Specialist at DRCOG. Some of you, I'm seeing a few familiar faces because I was here at your meeting, I think in May or June of last year, talking about one little piece of the MetroVision Regional Transportation Plan. We were talking about the Coordinated Transit Plan at that point, but we are here today to introduce you to the full 2050 MetroVision Regional Transportation Plan. The draft was released at the end of last week, so we're kind of going around to all of these great citizen groups around the region and just providing a quick introduction of what's in the plan, what you can expect, how you can provide input other than this meeting, some of the main topics, and we just kind of want to start a good discussion with you and hear what you guys think. So I'm going to actually start, well, first I'll give you a quick introduction of DRCOG. And first I want to introduce my colleagues that are here with me who are going to give the rest of the presentation as well. So Alvin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alvin Bilal Sanchez, and I'm a transportation planner here with DRCOG. The long-range plan, which we're presenting, has been a big part of my work the last year that I've been here.
And then we also have Jacob.
Hi, so I'm Jacob Rieger. I'm the Long Range Transportation Planning Manager at DRCOG. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Thanks, Jacob. And also with us is Annie Rice, who is our intern. Annie, do you want to say hi?
Hey, everyone. I'm a research assistant with DRCOG and a master's student in planning at CU Denver, and just sitting in because I've been helping with the engagement. Nice to see you all.
All right. So we're going to talk to you. We have a few slides, and then we're going to try to do some interactive polling, which is what we did at the last meeting that we came and saw you in June to talk about the Coordinated Transit Plan. So I think most of you are familiar with DRCOG. We are the regional government, council of governments, and we are 58 member governments, and RTD is also part of DRCOG as well. So one of our main things that we work on is transportation. And we have this cool little short video about the regional transportation plan that's more interesting than me giving you a quick overview. But of course, I have to figure out the right settings for the video, so give me 1 second. And then we will play the video. Let me know if you can't hear it or can't see it.
We're always on the go, walking, driving, biking. We all have places to be, but how often do we stop to think about everything that makes it possible to get where we need to go? Adding transit lines, constructing and fixing roads, creating bike paths, all these things make it possible for us to move around the region. They help us connect to the world around us, whether we're going to the grocery store, our jobs or school, to visit with family and friends, or to explore nature. As our region continues growing, we simply can't take for granted that our current infrastructure and systems will always be able to support our population. The Denver Regional Council of Governments brings community leaders together from across 10 counties to decide how our region funds and prioritizes transportation investments. The MetroVision Regional Transportation Plan looks ahead to 2050 so we can prepare for our population's continued growth over the next 30 years. The plan anticipates the region's needs, and we're involving residents to learn how we can meet those needs, from expanding our public transportation network to improving our roadways to making biking and walking safer and more accessible. Learn more about the Metro Vision Regional Transportation Plan and how you can shape the future of transportation.
All right. So I am going to get back to the PowerPoint. That's just a video. We actually created that almost 1.5 years ago as we kicked off the project, just to provide a quick overview of the plan, and I think it sets the framework really well. I'm going to swap back to the PowerPoint, and then Alvin is going to talk more about kind of the nuts and bolts of the plan. All right, take it away, Alvin.
Thanks, Lisa. So we do want to provide an update on the different steps we took to get to this part of our development, and also just provide a framework for what the RTP is in general, both for our current iteration, the past iterations, and what we'll be looking forward to in the future. So like the video mentioned, this is a plan that looks at the multimodal vision for the region. So it's not just roads or transit, it's the bicycle and pedestrian facilities. It's the impacts that the transportation system has on people. So the safety of the region, the security of the region, how freight and goods are moving through the region. A key part is making sure that we're not spending more than we think we'll have available. So as much as we would love to fund all of the projects and programs that we know the region needs, we have to prioritize what projects and programs can be included in the plan due to limited funding. This is one way that our overarching plan, Metro Vision, gets implemented. We do this update every 4 years, and we work with all of our partners in the region, not just CDOT and RTD, but all the local governments, the different toll authorities in the region. And then this is one way that we fulfill our functions as a metropolitan planning organization for the region. Now, when we come up on our summer deadline of when we're looking for final approval from the feds, we're looking at about a 2-year-long planning process. That's been broken out into about 4 different phases, and each phase has had its own distinct public engagement. Regardless of what we heard, whether it was in a survey, at a pop-up event, or in one of our advisory group meetings, we've heard some consistent themes across the last 2 years and from our different groups. One of the most important ones is investing in quality transit, and then providing more bicycle and pedestrian facilities for folk to have a choice of how they're getting around the region, as well as improving the safety for all users, especially vulnerable users in the region. Compared to that, there's less interest in funding new roads and new highways, and there's also an interest in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, so improving the air quality for the region. We also did a lot of stakeholder engagement, so separate from our public engagement. So we were meeting regularly with our county transportation forums, where we're able to get all the different local governments together in one place and talk about their priorities at a county level. We were also meeting regularly with CDOT and RTD. At one point last year, we were meeting weekly with them to go through all the different priorities that the 3 regional agencies and the local governments had. We did one-on-one meetings with local governments as well to make sure their priorities were included. And then we were also going through our own committee and board structure, periodically updating them or getting their feedback on the process that we wanted to use for this plan. Now, this is a long plan. We've made it a lot more fun, more visually compelling than we have in the past. We do want to provide just an update of what is in the plan, if what you're looking for. We have a larger description of what our public and stakeholder engagement looked like. We talk about what the transportation system looks like right now and what we think those needs and priorities are for each of those different components or the different issues on the system. We also obviously have a list of projects that are being included in the plan for investment over the next 30 years. We talk about the different outcomes that we're hoping this plan helps achieve in the region, whether that's more transit trips, reduced vehicle miles traveled, more safety in the region. We also look at potential impacts on the environment and low income and minority communities in the region. And then we have a large list of appendices as well that go into a lot more detail about safety, the different modal plans we have, our air quality conformity that we do to show how we're impacting air quality in the region. And I'm going to pass it over to Jacob to go into the highlights of the priorities that we've included in the plan and some of the outcomes that we're hoping to achieve through it.
Hey, thanks, Alvin. So I'll warn you, this is a little bit like drinking from a fire hose. So we will we'll try and summarize this as succinctly as we can. But as Alvin said, there's a lot of information included in the plan, as there should be, because this really is the region's multimodal transportation plan. So these next few slides, we're really going to talk about 6 themes, and they're the 6 themes that you see here. And these are the 6 themes that really sort of rose to the top through both our public and our stakeholder engagement over the last 1.5 years of putting this plan together. So for each of these themes, we're going to show some highlights of major projects in the plan, but also some programmatic and other elements addressing each of the themes in the regional transportation plan. So let's start with safety. Obviously, one of our very highest priorities, both at DRCOG, all of our stakeholders, our partners, and across the region. We all know that collectively this region needs to improve on safety for the traveling public. So like the other themes that you'll see in the next few slides for safety, we've identified several sort of profile projects, some big capacity projects. You see a partial list of some of those projects there in the middle of the screen. We have a lot of data and a lot of information around the safety topic. And then more programmatically in the plan, we've identified some things in our financial plan regarding safety. And we've also created really what we call a safety program. For those of you that are familiar with the Safer Main Streets collaboration between DRCOG and CDOT, that's a recent example, but something like that is what we want to continue over the life of this plan, where stakeholders come together, identify safety projects over time, and intentionally invest in those projects. And so that framework is laid out in this plan. Active transportation. So first, that term refers to sort of getting around without the use of a motor or an engine. So if you're walking or bicycling or rolling, that's what we're talking about here with active transportation. I should have mentioned on safety, and I'll mention here as well that both DRCOG and many of our stakeholders have adopted recent safety plans and recent active transportation plans, as well as some plans, on some of the upcoming slides. So part of the idea here is to take that good work that's already been done and really continue and further that implementation through the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. So as with safety, we've identified some major projects in the active transportation realm, but we've also identified some financial plan elements and some programmatic elements to continue sort of investment in active transportation through the life of this plan. Air quality is obviously another hugely important issue in this region. I think you all know that already. It's one of our primary federal requirements. Specifically, we need to demonstrate to the state and to the feds that this plan, with all the projects and all the investments that it includes, that collectively the projects within the plan, meet our what's known as our emissions budget test for air quality conformity, which it does. By the same token, many of you have heard of House Bill 1261, which is the state's greenhouse gas emission reduction, the climate action plan, starting to incorporate that within the regional transportation plan as well. So this one is similar to the other themes in the sense that a lot of financial investment, a lot of programmatic and other investment in the plan towards this topic don't really identify air quality projects per se, but the idea here was that collectively the investments in the plan will help us do what we're trying to do in terms of improve our air quality and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Multimodal mobility, basically what this means is the idea here is that, given the sort of scarce limited funding that we all have for transportation, as I know that you all know, when we're sort of allocating funding for major projects in this plan, major roadway or transit or safety or other types of projects, we're really looking for projects that can do multiple things at once. So for example, there are a lot of roadway projects in this plan because we are a growing region. We're going to add 1 million people in the next 30 years, as you saw in Alvin's slides. But even those projects, we said we want those projects to be multimodal. We want those projects to have a transit component, or a sidewalk or bike path component or a complete street, or whatever the case may be. So the idea of multimodal mobility was that, we really wanted multimodal projects in this plan. And we wanted projects that would do multiple things in the sense that maybe a transit project is also a safety project, or an active transportation project is also something that will help with air quality. So it's really the emphasis on those types of projects that this slide is communicating that we've included in the regional transportation plan. Freight maybe isn't as top of mind as some of the other topics that we're talking about, but of course, during the pandemic, I think we've all come to appreciate grocery delivery, food delivery, package delivery from Amazon and whatnot. So we know that freight plays a very important part in this region. Similar to some of these other topics that we're discussing, both DRCOG and CDOT and some local governments have recently adopted freight plans. So again, we want to continue that work in the regional transportation plan, both by identifying projects, and you see a few of those listed here, but again, a programmatic element to continue to invest in projects that will, over time, will continue to improve sort of freight and goods movement in this region. Finally, regional transit, obviously, I don't need to tell you how important that is. We really tackle transit in a variety of ways in this plan, sort of all the way from basic sort of investments, not basic, but, sort of continuous investments in local bus service and state of good repair and all the things that RTD needs to do. Those are included in our financial plan, but we've also identified some major projects, and some of those, again, you see listed here. Really major projects in a couple of themes. One is, as I think you all know, RTD recently completed the regional BRT feasibility study. We see this 2050 regional transportation plan as a key implementation tool for that study. We've actually identified, I think, 8 bus rapid transit corridors that we want to implement as part of the 2050 plan. So we've specifically identified those projects. We've also identified some other projects that we're calling transit planning corridors. The idea there is some of those corridors maybe aren't quite as far along, but there is sort of a desire or a need for transit investment on those corridors. And the plan envisions significant sort of additional planning work and financial investment in those corridors to create the specific vision, transit vision for those corridors over time. State Highway 7 and some other corridors are examples of those types of corridors. So we have those listed in the plan as well. We also have multimodal mobility hubs listed, not by specific locations, but that strategy of investment, because that's something that RTD, DRCOG, and CDOT and others are interested in, as well as other, sort of programmatic and other investments in transit in this regional transportation plan. So again, that was sort of drinking from a fire hose, but we at least wanted to give you a sense of what's in the plan. And now we're going to talk a little bit about how you can give input. Lisa?
All right, thanks, Jacob. All right, so like I said, we released the draft plan at the end of last week. So it is available for you to read all 180 pages in all its glory. But we've also developed a bunch of other ways for people to understand what's in the plan. There's a virtual on-demand open house, and we're having some public meetings. I'll talk more about that in the next slide. But today we really want to talk to you about your initial impressions about the plan, understanding that you probably haven't read it probably didn't spend your weekend reading it after we released it on Friday. But just to kind of gauge your impressions, and obviously I wish that we were meeting in person and that we could do this in person, but we've had some good success with the interactive polling tool Mentimeter, so that's what we're planning to use today. So we'll switch over to that and just ask a few questions, and that'll help us tee up the discussion. Like I said, we have a bunch of other opportunities for input though, so this is not your only opportunity to provide your thoughts. Obviously, if you want to read the whole plan and go through all of our other items and provide input at a later time, we would welcome that and really want to hear more from you. But like I said, we have this on-demand open house that's been developed. It has a bunch of surveys and discussion boards and different ways that people can give input. We're holding 3 virtual public meetings in late February, early March. We've also developed an interactive map so you can explore some of more of those projects. Jacob highlighted a few of each kind of related to those topics, but you can see all of the projects on the map. And then we have kind of our more typical public comment and public hearing, which will be on March 17th, which are also all opportunities to provide additional input. So with that, oh, and I did want to add one more plug that if you could share information about the plan or get anybody that you think might be interested in the plan and providing input and share that with them. We would greatly appreciate that because we want to hear from as many people as possible about what they think about the plan. So I'm going to jump over to Mentimeter. We have some test slides, but since I saw you guys in June, I'm guessing you probably already know, or most of you know how to use Mentimeter. So to save time for the rest of your meeting, I'll skip through my trivia questions as much as I love them. So if you go to www.menti.com, and you can either do this in a separate window on your computer that you're using, or I sometimes find it easier if you have a smartphone to use the smartphone to do it. And Jacob or Alvin, I think, will throw the link in the chat as well to make that easier for you. But you'll go to menti.com and you put in the code 4003413. And there's our first test question. Skipped my trivia one, but I still love to see where people are from. Got a lot of Colorado natives. Maryland, California, Idaho. All right, so you guys get the picture. Once what you type in or what your answers are will show up on the screen in real time. New Jersey, lots of Colorado. That's awesome. Michigan, well, Kentucky. Awesome. All places that were hit by this winter storm over the last few days. All right, so we'll get into the topic-specific questions. So basically, we've split it into those 6 main topics, and then there's kind of these two questions for each topic. The first asks, how well do you think that the 2050 RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan, will improve the safety of the regional transportation system? And then understanding that not all 6 of these things might be as important to you or equally important to you. We just kind of want to gauge how important to you is the safety of the transportation system. And you'll see that the questions are the same for each. We'll go through each of those topics. We have a little bit of time for you to get your votes in. And then feel free if you want to speak up while we're going through this. There's no need to stay quiet through the polling. It is intended to be kind of a discussion starter. And then we do have some time at the end, some more open-ended questions where we can discuss as well. But please feel free to interrupt at any point. Looks like most people have voted 6.4, kind of middle of the road, and 8.5 for how important it is. All right, next one is active transportation. Like Jacob said, that's anything really not using a motor to get around. How well do you think the plan will improve active transportation based on what you've heard today? And how important to you is it? And then what you're seeing on the screen as it's jumping around is it's averaging everyone's scores. Looks like active transportation is very important to this group. 9.4, but maybe the plan is just right in the middle, around 5 for how well it's improving it. All right. All right, 5.7 and 9.4. Next, we have air quality. How well do you think the plan will improve air quality, and how important to you is air quality? Another really important one. This is always very validating to see that in our 6 main priorities that we've heard through the whole planning process. Seems that we've hit the right topics at least, but a little bit right at the middle for how well the plan will improve that, 5.4. All right, next is multimodal mobility. Like Jacob said, that's kind of roads that also have other uses for them, transit, bike paths, sidewalks, things like that. So providing multiple options. How well do you think that this plan is going to improve the multimodal mobility, and how important to you is that? Similar responses, maybe a little less important than some of the other ones and a little bit higher than the others as well. Great. All right, Freight, top of everyone's mind. How well do you think that the plan will improve freight movement in the region? And how important to you is freight? How many packages have I gotten delivered to my house today? An embarrassing amount. All right. Not super surprised that freight rate's a little bit lower than the other ones, though it is very important to our region, just doesn't quite hit the same personal level as safety and active transportation and things like that. And that one's right at the middle, 5.1. All right, and the one I think is going to be most important to this group, regional transit. How well do you think the plan will improve regional transit, and how important to you is regional transit? And if that bottom bar is any lower than 9, I'm going to be a little confused. All right, 9.7, that's very high. And again, kind of in that middle road, 5.3, okay. All right, so we just have a couple open-ended. These are ones that you, oh no, sorry, there's one more. This one's general, but one more multiple choice. So this is thinking of all of these topics and thinking that all of us have our own ideas about what the ideal transportation system for a region is going to be in 2050. How well do you think that this plan is aligning with what your ideal transportation system is? It's like very well, lots of somewhat well, not at all well, not so well. So kind of all around the board, somewhat well, kind of the largest one. All right, now we'll get to the open-ended questions. So thinking more on that, drawing out why you think that, in what areas that you've heard in this presentation does the plan least align with your ideal transportation system? And this is one that you can type in like you typed in the state you're from, and it'll pop up. And this one definitely open up to discussion. I'd like to maybe hear some more about what you're thinking of the different topics, or ones that stood out to you, or ones where you felt like things were lacking. Who knows what will even be going on next year? That is a struggle with long-range transportation planning. Rail not to complete until 2040 or later. The timing of the projects, yep. Still highly dependent on vehicular travel, single occupancy vehicle. Hard to fix that with our land use patterns. It's a good comment. Absence of focus on driverless vehicles, too much focus on surface transit. Light rail system may be counted on too much. Buses, lots of working from home, which may continue. We've heard a lot about working from home. Much more in obviously the last year than when we kicked off this plan. Roadway improvements don't typically relieve congestion. I think non-motor transportation is not realistic, especially given how much the suburbs continue to grow. Need to spend more time with planned topics to make comments. That's a great point. Obviously, distilling a long and 30-year plan into basically six slides about the highlights is difficult. That's why I definitely encourage you to take a look at the full plan. I just never feel confident that we'll fund active transport, multiple modes at the level that we need to. We should flip the formula to fund active transportation at the highest level. Too much focus on auto-oriented infrastructure. All right. Doesn't incorporate new issues, work from home patterns, breadth of population dispersion, et cetera. Don't see people getting out of their cars. Does anybody want to expand on kind of what they're typing in? Feel free. Sorry, I've been reading them out loud. I don't want to make you feel like you can't speak up. See the comment about equity. All right. Well, we'll go to the flip side of this question. In what areas does the plan most align with your ideal transportation system? What kind of piqued your interest and you thought, oh, that's what I think too. That's what we need to be doing.
This is Joanna Morsicato. I'm one of the co-chairs. I thought I'd make a real comment here.
Yeah, please.
I love the interactive menti.com setup, but I feel like I don't know enough detail about the plan at this point to make useful comments in the last few questions you've asked. And so I'm not, but I wanted to point that out, that this is a good format to use. It's just, I feel like I need more data myself to make good comments.
I totally understand that. Yeah, we try to make the most of these virtual settings and virtual Zoom meetings and try to make it a little more interactive with the Mentimeter, but it's a challenging topic. It's obviously a long-term, long-range transportation plan with a lot of detail that does, that you do want to take a look at the full plan to be able to give your full input. So I hope you will check out our virtual open house that you can look at, view the plan, provide comments through there, or you can always shoot me an email with all your comments, things like that. So we've tried to provide a bunch of other ways between now and next month when we have our public hearing to hear more comments when you feel like you've been able to review the plan in more time. See, we've been getting multimodal air quality comment. Can we do it? As a stakeholder in the employee-based trip reduction program, I'm really excited to see that the plan is putting air quality in the forefront. It's great. Paying attention to freight because we are all using FedEx, et cetera, especially this last year. Does anyone else want to share comments? Be out loud. You're not typing them in.
Lisa, just out of curiosity, does DRCOG have any active studies about COVID travel plans, work plans, and how people may or may not go back to work?
You know, I know that we've been engaged in a bunch of different surveys of employers over the last year. And so we're kind of, I don't know the full details of it, but just kind of marking people's, trying to think of the right survey term, their impressions of work from home and whether they like it or things like that. So we've been tracking that throughout with multiple surveys. Jacob, do you know anything more about that?
Yeah, I'll say a couple things. One is that I believe we just recently published a data brief on our website, and we can certainly send you a link to it because we've gotten a lot of questions, at least, how have things changed in the short term since the pandemic began. So we did put together what we call a data brief on that. And again, I think that's available publicly, so we can send that to you. In terms of the future, this is a question that we've wrestled with in this plan. And we've gotten that question quite a bit of like, how will COVID change travel patterns in the future? And the honest answer is we don't know yet, right? But we did some scenario analysis work, and I think maybe you saw some of that at an earlier meeting during the planning process. And one of the things we really explored was the power of sort of multiple modes, travel options, and particularly around telework. And we've actually increased a little bit our telework assumptions in our regional traffic model. Again, it's hard to say, is it, because I think right now we're assuming, I want to say around 10%. And like I said, I think we've increased that for the future. And it's hard to say what the exact number should be, but the idea is that we think we know that there's going to be some increased instance of telework over time. And we wanted to try and reflect that in terms of future assumptions about our transportation system.
Thank you.
Can I follow up on that? This is Matt. I realize your crystal ball is a little cloudy. It's hard to he's going to bring. But COVID or not, and I think COVID's just made these changes happen faster, it sure does seem as if there's going to be a lot more telecommuting. And as you know, at least roadway congestion is very nonlinear, so that relatively small amounts of increased telecommuting, 5 or 10% during peak hours, would probably have a huge impact on congestion, and therefore an equally huge impact on how many roads you have to build. And most of this plan still is roads between the regional and the local. I mean, it's way heavily loaded towards roadways. So, we're 30 years out. Do you really think there isn't going to be a bigger change?
Yeah, I hear you, and it's a good question. And again, the honest answer is we don't know for sure. I think what we tried to do in this plan is strike more of a balance than we ever have before about the multimodal nature of this plan. And a lot of the projects in the plan, while they are occurring on roadways, are safety projects or active transportation projects or transit projects. Yes, as I said, there are still many roadway projects, and in particular, there's some local government roadway projects that they'll fund, really being driven by sort of new growth in those areas of the region. But we really focused on wanting to have a lot of multimodal projects. Particularly, I think the transit network that we have in this plan is a lot more robust than we've ever had, particularly given the funding challenges that RTD and others have around transit right now. And even the freeway projects, I believe every single project in this plan on a freeway is a managed lanes type of project. There might be one exception, I'd have to go back and look at the list, but virtually, or maybe all of them, are managed lanes projects. And that's something that we haven't done before. So again, we're collectively turning the Titanic in terms of what we want this region to be. And it takes time, but we think this plan will really be a big step in that direction.
Well, the follow-up question I have, if I can, well, two, I guess, I'll just glue them together. I mean, one, back to technological changes, whether we're really going to have autonomous vehicles or not. Maybe by 2050 we will. And a lot of mixed crystal balling here about how that will help. It will make things safer, but it also might mean people will move further away from where they were. All the bad things that we'll get from it, and increase vehicle miles traveled, not decrease them. So there's that. And that really leads to my real question, which is your critical assumptions about land use patterns for 2050, because that really drives everything. I mean, the reason our current system is so fragmented and such a mess, and frankly, so I think impossible to fix, isn't because of DRCOG or because what you're trying to do with transportation. It's our land use patterns that are hopelessly broken right now. And there is no transit system that works well in our current land use patterns. So what are your assumptions for 2050 and how did you derive them?
Yeah, that's a great sort of combined question. Let me succinctly try to respond to it. On the technology side, one of the many things that's in this plan, and again, as Lisa said, it's hard to summarize a plan with 4 chapters and 19 appendices in about 6 slides or so. So we didn't touch on everything. And one of the things we didn't touch on is that a couple of years ago, RTD, DRCOG, CDOT, and the Denver Metro Chamber came together to prepare something called the Mobility Choice Blueprint. And just in a nutshell, that was an exploration of the potential impacts or effects, opportunities of technology on mobility in this region in the future. And it was kind of groundbreaking work, if I can say, in terms of a regional approach to technology and mobility. So yes, it looked at autonomous vehicles, but it also looked at kind of the whole spectrum of what could change in technology as it affects transportation and what this region can do to start preparing for it. So we could give a whole presentation on that, but just know that all those issues you're bringing up, you're exactly right. We looked at those, we struggled with those, like the impact on VMT if people live farther away because of technology. But that work is incorporated within the plan. When it comes to land use, in our scenario analysis, again, really briefly here, we looked at several scenarios, both on the transportation side and on the land use side. And we actually did 3 land use scenarios, really 2 sort of a base case and then 2, kind of different land use scenarios. And it's interesting the power of land use by itself to affect changes in mobility and travel behavior. Land use, frankly, is a transportation strategy, and I think that's what you're getting at. For this plan, for the adopted 2050 plan, we have some federal and other requirements in terms of working cooperatively with our local governments, and that really is sort of a local government. I mean, it's the purview of local governments to make land use decisions. As you know, it's not a DRCOG purview. So the land use assumptions in this 2050 plan are local government driven. That said, what that analysis showed us is that there really is a gap between maybe where we are and where we think we might be versus where we could be. And that's one of the things that DRCOG wants to work on over the next period of months of time of sort of that gap analysis. What can be done cooperatively in the land use arena to get us closer to where the potential from our scenario work showed us we could be.
When I was on the Centennial Planning Commission, people did not like my comments because I was always indicating that we put multifamily in the middle of nowhere. No transit of any kind, 1,500 units and 1,500 cars. I mean, there's just no way around it. There's wrong places to put housing, and they kept putting them in the wrong places. I found it extremely frustrating.
I think it would be fun, that maybe isn't the right word, but at least interesting, given that you have all this modeling capability and you've looked at some land use options, would be to demonstrate or to show how a different type of land use pattern would make a really significant change in mobility in the region, both in terms of cost and in terms of access, and probably in terms of safety too, in terms of the first two. I don't know that it would change anybody's mind, including where I happen to live in Boulder, but it might at least gain some attention. I think people don't really believe it in a way. I think it's, well, it just isn't going to change much, but you said it exactly right. Land use is a transportation strategy.
Yeah.
That's exactly right, but it also can be a huge cost saving strategy, and it can provide much improved mobility, especially for people who right now have fewer options, which often includes
Well,
anyway,
air quality.
showing that would be great, even if it's not terribly realistic, just to kind of open some people's eyes.
That's a great comment, and we do have some results from those scenarios that Jacob talked about that I'd be happy to share the link if you want to dive in deeper and see kind of what we played around with. Move the dials is what they always told me is what they were doing with that. So
Highly technical work.
Yeah, I'll throw that link in the chat once we're done here. Are there any other comments that anyone else wants to get in? I know we're running a bit over our allotted time, and I want to get you back to your agenda, but would love to hear any final thoughts.
Thank you for saying that. I was about to interrupt and say it's time to get back to our next item.
Yeah.
This has been great. I'm sure many of us would like to make more comments, so I'm not quite sure what the best way to do that is, but whatever you want to give us, you could provide to Roger and he can send it forth to us.
If you can provide that link, Lisa, and any other information, I'll get it circulated around.
Absolutely. I'll drop it in the chat here as well, and then I'll send you an email following up with all of that too. I just want to say thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. I loved getting to talk to you about this today, and I hope you have a good rest of your gray, kind of snowy day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa,
all
Jason,
of you for your presentation.
Alvin, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
So now
right.
we're ready for another work session. New service change engagement work session. That's a mouthful. And I guess we have Pauletta. Are you going to take that? I never can find people's picture on all of this screen here. There she is.
Yep, I'm here. Hello, how are you guys?
We
Good
are
to
good.
see you. So yeah, if you're ready, I'll just dive right in and talk to you guys about our new process of stakeholder engagement that we are really expanding our approach to stakeholder engagement across the board at RTD. And one way that we are starting to incorporate that is in our service change process. So as you know, we do service changes 3 times a year, and there's always a public hearing process that happens after the draft service plan is brought to the board. That is then released, and then we do a round of public hearings, getting people's input, right? But this is something different. And so I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen. So Roger, if you want to give me the power that you have, the B. I'll try to share my screen.
I think I have, Pauletta, if you give it a try.
All right, let's see if I can make this work here. Let me see here. I've got several things open, so here we go. Okay.
All right, looks like it's working.
Okay. Let's see, can you guys see my screen like in its like presentation mode?
Yep.
Okay, all right, here we go. There we go. So as I mentioned, one of the things that we are doing across the agency is really enhancing the engagement that we do. And as our new CEO, Deborah Johnson, has described it, is us wanting to go where the people are as much as we can, because you know, obviously we work within the resources we have, but there's opportunities for us in the various things we do to go to stakeholders and community groups in their meetings and talk to them about what we have going on at RTD, and then give them a chance to give us feedback. And so one aspect of that is how we're starting this new process for our service changes, where in addition to that public hearing process I mentioned, on the front end, when we're starting to think about the service adjustments that we'll make next, that we do this listening phase, where we want to hear from people about what they're seeing in their communities. How does RTD service start to impact people and people recovering from the pandemic and what have you? So these stakeholder listening sessions, we're giving it a shot. We're just jumping right in and gonna do some listening on the front end before we do our next service change, which will be in June. And then this input will be considered in the development of the draft service plan that staff then brings to the board of directors. And that will be taking place next month in March. So obviously you guys know this because last month I talked to you guys a little bit about you know, the pandemic and the impacts, and you guys are very aware, but we really wanted to utilize the Citizens Advisory Committee as one of our listening opportunities, because you guys represent communities. You guys are very engaged in what's going on with RTD. And you also, I think, know a lot about what we've been doing over the past year. So I won't repeat a lot of what you guys have already seen as it relates to all the things that we've done to protect our employees, our customers, the general public during the pandemic, but a myriad of things that we have done, and it continues to evolve. I think I also talked to you guys in my last audience with you about the growing body of research that indicates that riding transit is actually very safe. It is not a COVID spreader. There have not been cases of COVID spreading tied back to people riding transit across the world, really. And so this is, I think, something that we can all continue to tout. And the reasons for that are many, but some of the reasons why people are saying it's actually fairly safe to ride transit is because people largely follow the rules when they ride transit. They wear masks and face coverings. I've ridden light rail many times during the pandemic, and people do wear masks. There might be those people that won't, but that is not common. And people do social distance when they're on our system. And that also, our airflow and the airflow exchange is very, very adequate, and actually much more than many other ways that people move around. And our airflow and the opening of doors and windows also does help with that air exchange as well. And so these are all reasons why transit is actually safe, and we continue to share that and encourage people to be our partners in safety. But obviously, the financial impacts of COVID continue to haunt us. Even though we have been the beneficiaries of some federal assistance, we still are facing budget issues and have done a number of things to address that, and will continue to do that moving forward. We had the $232 million in CARES Act funding in 2020. That's what allowed us to keep people employed through 2020. As you know, we had to then work on a workforce reduction plan because we were positioned to have a $140 million deficit for 2021. And once we did the workforce reduction notifications, we then found out about the next round of federal assistance. And we often get asked, well, why didn't you just wait? Why did you have to do your layoff notifications if you knew that there was another round of COVID funding that was going to be happening? Well, we had heard about it and it was in the works, but we did not have any clarity on what that funding would be or when it would happen. And our board approved the budget in November, so we had to march forward in planning for 2021. And then, of course, notified those employees who were no longer going to be with us. And literally that next day after those workforce reductions took effect is when we found out about the next round of COVID relief funding. So what we have been doing is calling back to work our represented employees. And so all of those who were interested in coming back to work have been called back to work. And those people will allow us to have supplemental trips and be able to, we'll be able to utilize them when we need to pull other buses into service to help us keep the social distancing and accommodate any increases in ridership that we're seeing. And we have seen that on some of our more popular routes and those that have been ridden most. So that is going to be a benefit to us moving forward as we start to look at recovering and how do we address when we do see those ridership increases coming back. But even with this COVID relief funding that we have had, we still faced a financial challenge. And I think you guys are very aware of that. And, you know, that's part of our reality moving forward. So when we talk about what the needs are currently with our service, we currently are operating still at about a 60% service level as we were pre-pandemic. And we started that pandemic service plan, as you know, in April, and we have continued at about that level, making some minor adjustments where necessary and moving some service to areas where, as I mentioned, we're serving more riders. So we will continue to do that, but we still have quite a substantial reduction in the ridership that we had previously. And so as we look to recover, what adjustments can we make? That is why we're holding these listening sessions as we march forward into our next service change is how do we continue to plan ahead while we continue to look at the operator availability that we have, overlaid with the capacity limits that we still have to have on our buses and trains, and be thoughtful about what we do have available to us in terms of the tweaks or adjustments that we can be making. So again, you guys are a built-in group for us that we always like to utilize for any of our engagement when possible. So we thought, hey, great group is the CAC for us to use to go where the people are and to come to one of your meetings, because now this process that we're starting over the next couple of weeks is to listen. We want to know, how is your community recovering from the pandemic? Are you seeing that in your communities? What are you hearing about RTD service in your communities? How are you seeing changes in transit? And is this something you're noticing more now, or is it about the same? Is a return to in-person learning going to be changing at all in your communities that we would need to know about that maybe we're not aware of? And are there things happening in your community that would be helpful for us to know as we make the next round of service adjustments? So again, to just kind of frame this for you, we want to hear what you have to say. What are you seeing? What are you experiencing? What are you hearing about RTD service across the region? And then our service planners will listen and take that into account as they develop the draft service plan that they're going to bring to the RTD Board of Directors next month in March. And then we'll release that draft service plan to the public and do our typical public hearing process. So I'm going to turn it over now to my colleagues in RTD service planning who are on the meeting with us today, and they will then facilitate this next round of Q&A and get that engagement happening, just listening to you folks and see you know, what feedback you have to give us. And I believe Natalie and Mo are on the meeting with us today. Is that correct?
Actually,
Yes.
Jesse, you are there. I'm sorry, I didn't see you. So
it's okay. I was
you
going
were
to
my
say,
go-to guy, but then I didn't see your name. So okay, I'll call
well,
on Natalie
no problem.
and Mo.
No problem. You did all the heavy lifting in this presentation so far. So I'm much obliged to go ahead and ask the 2 questions that we have. And again, like Paula has mentioned, we are really hoping to hear from you, your knowledge about what's going on in your community and your viewpoint on where we stand with COVID and its effects on transit. So the first question that we have is, what transit needs in your community should we be aware of? And please don't leave me hanging on this. I will go to the participants list and start calling out names randomly and no one responds. But I'm sure with this group, there will be plenty of folks. So if you could please answer the question, what transit needs in your community should we be aware of?
Jesse, I think you should play the Jeopardy music just to give everybody time to.
Yeah, you don't want me humming, singing, or trying to carry any kind of tune whatsoever. It's not a good thing.
You're right. Okay, I'll go back on mute.
All right.
All right, looks like we have Dawn. If you want to go ahead first, Dawn.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know this isn't until the fall, but in Boulder, I know that Fauci said that the people are going to be vaccinated. Hopefully there'll be vaccinations ready for people by the summer. And I know that the East Campus of CU Boulder is going to be a vaccination hub. So while as far as I know, the students will be back as usual, but they're telling the people who work in East Campus to not come in. They're going to work from home because so many people are going to be showing up to that side of campus. So just an FYI.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And we will certainly keep an eye out on that. And that's something we would certainly respond to in the September service change. But, you know, it's good to know that sooner than later. So we appreciate that. Any other comments at this point?
Folks, you can also type in your information if you're wanting to think about it. Type it into the chat box, and we'll capture that and provide all of those chats to the team. But I do see we've also got Andrea and Travis. So Andrea, you want to go next?
Roger, real quick, this is Natalie. Dawn, follow up, who would be our contact at CU to make sure that we don't lose track of that?
I actually don't know. I'm sorry. They have a communications department. I would assume that that's where I would, but I just know because of people I know who work there and that they've already been informed of this concerning the fall.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
sure
we no
not
longer have David Cook as our contact, so guess we'll have to track that down. But thank you for letting us know.
Yeah, if I hear more, I'll let you guys know.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my turn. My neighborhood is actually at the corner of Arapahoe Road and Yosemite, so we're pretty much in the middle of the Denver Tech Center, close to Inverness, close to Meridian. And we are served by, I'll call in rides, flex rides. We have a flex ride that takes people to the light rail, and I have noticed that people they're still not brave enough to get out and get on the train. We do have a lot of people that bike into the tech center. I see them on their bikes trying to cross Arapahoe Road. So I'm not so sure we have a lot of transit needs because we do have a lot of service. And I have noticed that, you know, our light rail has shrunk, but it's still available. I just don't think our people are ready to use it in my area.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I live not that far from that area too, and I have a very clear view of one of our stations, Dayton Station, and I have seen quite a bit of reduction in the level of ridership on the HN and R lines, and that's true on many of our commuter-driven services. So that peak hour services, we're seeing low ridership on those services. I want to say that the Route 66 is also in your area, and we're seeing, you know, the ridership on that is also down quite a bit. It was a route that was growing prior to the pandemic, but yeah, it's the ridership is down on it as well. But again, thank you for your comments.
All right,
What
I
I
see.
have noticed is tremendous traffic is back on I-25. The cars are back.
Yeah, I'm not sure they ever left. So thank you.
All right, let's move on to Pastor Dell. You are on mute. Oh, there we go.
All right, sure. I put mine also in the chat. Some of the things I hear most often with members in the African American community is just general accessibility, having transit available in the neighborhoods where we're dominantly located to get to places where they need to go. Chief place being you know, places of employment, and the portion within our community that has that seems to have the greatest needs when it comes to accessibility are our seniors. Even the hesitancy they may have just on the reliability of transportation in the areas where they live.
Okay, well, thank you, sir. I think we have heard that loud and clear, and that is the community would like to make sure that RTD is paying very close attention to service reliability during this time frame, and we're doing what we can. That's part of what the funds that we received from the federal government for COVID relief is actually set to do. We were able to hire back many of our full-time and our part-time operators, and our strategy at this point in time is to try to utilize as many of those operators as we can to support what we're required to do as far as social distancing and also providing reliability. So thank you for your comment.
All right, Joan, do you want to go ahead with your comments?
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay, and thank you everyone who's spoke before. I'm sure I could definitely echo some of the other sentiments that everyone else has shared so far. One thing that I will add to the discussion is that I manage the Boulder Junction Access District, and obviously, as you guys know, they do not have transit service there right now. And I've been speaking more recently with a couple of different board members to let them know that there actually is affordable housing that has been opening within the access district, that we provide eco passes to individuals to take transit, but obviously there is no service there for them to take it. So just wanted to let you guys know that that's happening, that there are more AMI housing apartment complexes popping up or rent to own in that area. As well, there are a lot of other businesses that are likely going to be returning to the office in the fall of 2021. Larger organizations like Twitter will be relocating to the junction, Spark, all these larger tech companies. So just wanted to make sure that that's discussed a little bit.
Okay, thank you for letting us know. We appreciate your comment.
And just, Jesse, to pop over to the chat for a sec here, we have Elizabeth saying that in Lone Tree, Parker, Highlands Ranch, it is generally commuter, but Lone Tree City Council just approved the first attainable housing project in Ridgegate. So there will be 67 units at the Ridgegate end of the line station.
Okay.
So
be happy to see some development down in there.
Yes, and so it begins.
Good.
Okay, and then let's just go through the next chat comment here from Kit. So in the North area, we've seen really good ridership with a grant-funded flex ride 144th and I-25 station area. So we also have a project manager there that takes ownership and resolves issues and optimizes constantly. I've just really been stuck with the fact that we've seen great growth in this service due to the fact that someone is taking it very personally to make the service a success. I feel like it is a potential paradigm shift in delivering very good, highly responsive transit service.
All right.
Great, yeah.
Certainly applaud the success of the service going to Amazon in that area. And she's right in noting that Flex Ride is actually meeting some of the ridership goals for a Flex Ride of that size. So they're to be applauded for that. So thank you for the comment.
Great. All right, so we have Joan with a hand up. Go ahead, Joan. Or Joanna, I'm sorry. You have one merged name.
Yes, there are both of us here. Actually, I'm probably going to say something similar to what Joan said. I live up in the foothills, and of course, we don't have service right now up here. I think there are, I want to call us outliers, and a number of places that it made sense to cut out the service for a while. I don't think the people who use the service are too pleased with that. I guess I'd like us to not forget that there are communities like Parker and Conifer and Evergreen and so forth, I guess Boulder Junction possibly as well, that are interested in using transit, but obviously don't have enough attraction for riders right now. Some way we need to keep that in the, on the list of things to solve into the future. I cannot imagine running I love the big regional express buses, but that's not a very practical thing to run when you've got just a couple riders. So I don't know the solution, but I want us to keep it in mind that at some point we will want to have a plan for that as things change. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, and your comments are on point. We are waiting for some changes to occur and people coming back to work, and some of the larger transit traffic generators, ridership generators, like downtown, for example. So many of the services like the Route P coming from Parker, or the EV CV coming from Jefferson County, those routes did suffer the biggest hits in terms of ridership. We were down to literally single digits on board. So that's not mass transit. So we did have to take a step back on those. So, but we are taking a look and monitoring what's going on as far as employment centers and major generators. And when it looks like the service will be warranted, yes, we will provide those services back. Okay.
Thank you. All right, Matt, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, just quick. I assume you stay in really close contact with the school districts and CU as they are slowly switching back to in-person learning. I mean, in the Boulder world, which I know about, certainly some number of high school kids take buses to school. And CU just this week went back to some in-person class. Percent is. If that goes well, I assume they'll go to more. And that's a huge number of riders. The vast majority of CU students live off campus. And a heck of a lot of them live outside of Boulder and come in on various regional routes. So I don't have any particularly great insight into this other than I assume you're talking to them regularly, and as that changes, let's hope it goes well, and let's hope that they continue to increase the amount of in-person schooling. I think you're going to have to kind of increase your service in line with that, because these folks are transit dependent. I mean, they really have no other way to get around unless they live close enough to bike, but in this weather, that's not so terrific. So yeah, anyway, that's obviously region-wide an issue. The campuses down in Denver, elsewhere, As well as some of the school districts that have kids that do actually use RTD to get around.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to actually ask Notley Honlos if she can speak directly to some of her conversations with Boulder Valley School District and with CU.
Yes, hi. Yes, we've been in touch with Boulder Valley, and we were actually able to coordinate additional trips for the high school students on Route 204 and 206. We'll start those on February 22nd. We're looking to continue those through the end of the year. Hopefully everybody will stay in class and things will get better. Same with CU, we will start having those conversations. If they're looking to go back in the fall, we will check and see what they're anticipating as to what numbers are back in the classroom and get some better idea as to where these folks are coming from. And then we'll figure out what we can do, depending on our resources, of course. We'll always have to look and see what our resources are. But that would then fall in line with, Jesse said earlier, with our September run board, our fall run board. And so we would look to then make the adjustments as best as possible.
Okay.
Good point. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay. And on the Denver side of things, Auraria campus has quite a bit of service that actually goes to it via 2 rail stations on Auraria. We also have a number of bus routes that serve different parts of the campus, and many of them are still operating even under the COVID plan. As far as DPS is concerned, we've been in direct contact with DPS, and actually recently through Pauletta had a meeting with the leadership of DPS to better coordinate with what their calendars and what their bell times will look like. So we're certainly in touch with the larger school districts and those who participate in past programs.
Just one quick follow-up on CU. I have no doubt that they're going to try to go in person in the fall. I'm more concerned, I suppose, about this semester as they slowly, and I don't know what the percent is, but as they slowly open up more classes to be in person. And the catch is there may not be enough to really justify increasing transit service. I get that. But on the other hand, you know, really the kids are transit dependent. So talking to CU about now as well as in the fall, I think would be really good.
Absolutely. And like I said, Notley is in direct contact with CU now. We appreciate your comments. Lindsay, should we move to question number 2?
Yes, sir. You read my mind.
Okay, question number 2. What feedback do you have about the overall transit service in your community? So what have you heard?
So as we maybe wait for some hands to be raised to speak specifically to that, Dawn in the chat just said that she would like to piggyback on Matt's comments. And that's kind of the reason why she mentioned the vaccination on East Campus. So just to make sure that we have buses running to get people there. So thank you so much, Dawn, for that. And then also from Tony. Tony says many agencies around the country are offering free rides to those groups to or from vaccination appointments. So yes, kind of Tony, to touch on that, RTD has been in touch with CDPHE in terms of potentially supporting transportation to vaccination sites. So I definitely think that we will see those partnerships moving forward as well.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, anybody else? Just general feedback, if good, bad, the ugly, what you have for us?
Okay, I give it 5 more seconds. After that, I withdraw the question.
Oh, all right, Travis, we have a taker.
A lot of the feedback that Jill shared is good. The piece I would add, I've heard from some people that with a lot of the COVID service changes, the routes that run every 60 minutes now, it's become really hard to use because of transfers between them and other local routes that also run every 60 minutes. Not really at like cross street intersections, but particularly at like rail stations where maybe one of those local routes arrives at the top of the hour and the other one now arrives at 30 minutes after the hour because the times that got cut like alternated between the two. And so now they can't do the transfer because it takes 30 minutes to wait for like the connecting bus at that rail station or park and ride or wherever they're meeting the connection.
Travis, can you give me an example of which route in particular?
I can give you a couple. US 36 and Broomfield Station has become really bad, especially between like the north-south 76 route, and then if you're trying to transfer, say, to like the 120, which is the east-west route that connects there. Those are like half an hour off. And I think there's one at the 40th and Airport Station, or the 169 bus runs every hour, and that's a similar thing where one of the, I forget the connecting route it's going into, but one of them where anyone that used to do that connection has to wait like 30 minutes for the next bus to continue the trip.
Okay, thank you so much for humoring me on the idea of giving me the exact route numbers. I really appreciate that. That makes it a lot easier to address. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, and then we have from Roger, Jesse, can you describe how the service change engagement will be handled this year? What's different? Participation is typically low.
You know, it's a good question. However, one of the things that I won't say is a good part of COVID, because I don't want to say that there's anything good about COVID, but we have learned that having the meetings held over the internet, either via Facebook Live or Zoom or Microsoft Teams, we've actually, in the last go around, we did have a very good turnout. And we also, as far as Facebook Live, people were able to take a look at, even after the meeting was over, they were able to add comments and take a look at what was said during the meeting. So I think that we're going to continue with that and continue with having the the meeting like this over the air, and being able to have a good discussion with a number of people who may or may not have been able to come to a meeting live. So we are doing it differently in that regard. The other part is we're still tied to some federal requirements about how we announce our meetings, and everything will be sticking to that. But this is a part of the new portion of the whole process, where we're reaching out to stakeholders ahead of time, and then going in to talk to the board of directors, and then going back out to then talk to the community at large. So the key difference is this process that we're going through now and the use of internet meetings.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, I do think the opportunity for us to really dive into this virtual setting has helped us reach more people, and we're trying to kind of tweak the best way to get the most engagement out of it. We were actually just looking at, Jesse and Christina last year pre-recorded 2 of the public presentations that we gave, one in English and one in Spanish. And actually we had 150 views on the Spanish version on our YouTube page, and over 450 for the English on our YouTube page, which if any of you have been involved in our service change process, by no means do you even scratch the surface of getting that close at a public meeting, right? And then we were also getting probably about 50 people on average to the virtual meetings, which in the past, you don't see those numbers unless, something big's happening and people are really passionate about it, right? So I have found that to be interesting. And then also from this process, we've learned that the best time to engage our audiences is actually during lunchtime. Those are the meetings where we've had the highest amount of turnout, and we're finding, look at us, we're on Zoom meetings all day, every day. So if we're hosting a meeting at 6 o'clock at night, people are done, right? They want to log off, hang out with their families. So actually, taking this stuff into the midday because people can get on virtually has been very helpful as well.
It has.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Lindsay, for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any more comments or questions at this point? Hearing none?
I don't see any.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate the conversation and the feedback you've provided us today. Obviously, we're around still if you think of anything after we are done here today, so feel free to reach out.
Well, thank you, too. We appreciated all of you being here and got some pretty good feedback. I think the second question was harder to answer when some of us didn't have any service to comment on. So
Valid
anyway,
point.
thank you so much for taking time to share with us, of course.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
So the next item is the co-chair election. We postponed that from last month to give people an opportunity to think a little bit more about it. Matt has expressed a willingness. I'm not sure I like that idea. No, I'm kidding, Matt. Matt sent me an email that said, oh, maybe I should rethink it because I'm going to have to spend more time working with me. So, touche. But
just for the record, I've known Roger for a long time, and
a long time, yes. But I wanted to open it up to others that would be interested in serving, or if no one else, then I would, of course, be delighted to take Matt up on his offer.
Well, it's a good thing I like working with Matt because I'm the other co-chair. So I guess we'll have to joke back a little bit on that.
All right. Well, a hotly contested race, Matt. Congratulations.
I think we should review the voting here. You know, it could
Oh,
have
we
been.
probably have to count them, right?
Yeah, I've heard there's some problems with the tabulation.
We, it was a fraudulent election. We all know that.
Oh, right. Do we use it? Do we have an electoral college that we have?
So, all right. Well, Matt, I'll be in touch
all right, thanks.
tomorrow, and we can talk about kind of what you just signed up for.
Yeah, and thanks everybody. And look, it really is too bad that we can't meet in person. Zoom is great in its way, but it really does not replace getting to know people, especially a lot of the newer people. And I haven't been doing this for that long either. So I'm just hoping that later this year we can get together and we actually can chat with each other in person because, yeah, Zoom's good for having presentations and getting some questions out, fine, but it's just terrible for, meeting people and getting to know each other and who we are and what our concerns are and so on. So let's hope by later this year, and then, hopefully Joanna and I can meet with each of you and chat about some of the stuff we're working on and what you want to work on.
All right, great.
It is very true what you said, that although the presentations are great, and actually we've had good turnout on the Zoom meetings from our own group, but those little subtleties that happen when you meet in person in the room and you chit chat a little bit before the meeting starts and everybody hangs around afterwards, and all those little pieces are missing. So anyway, welcome to the co-chair team, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
We'll be talking some more.
All right, the next item, Joanna, was just kind of other matters. We did have the accountability interim report from the RTD Accountability Committee was issued. I sent a link to that. I'm sure people have read some of the stories on it. I don't know if Pauletta or anybody wants to do any, make any comments, or I just wanted to put that on the agenda so people, you all on the committee, could discuss it and have comments. And then Ben also sent me an email that had asked, if RTD Pauletta had any comments or thoughts on the governor's statement the other night during our study session. I have plenty to say about it, but I will refrain. And we can hear from the official response.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, first of all, I think that it's been great that we have now opened the door to a very open, transparent dialogue, right? Excuse me, about all of the remaining fast tracks projects that we don't have the money to complete at this point. Obviously, the one of most interest that we've been hearing about has been Northwest Rail. So I think it was great that the board had that open dialogue and that the governor was able to join us briefly. And that was huge for us to be able to have him on the line and share his thoughts. Obviously, he's very passionate about completing Northwest Rail, as are many people. And so what we are looking forward to is continuing the dialogue and where we go from here. What our CEO, Deborah Johnson, asked the board for is to be able to come back within 60 days with some recommendations on next steps. And this is something that is going to take partnership and money, right? I mean, if we're going to get these remaining projects done, that's really what it's going to take. And there are some opportunities, and some of them were shared in the presentation by staff and discussed during the board study session. Obviously, one of those being partnership with the Front Range Passenger Rail. And as Amtrak looks to expand their service in the corridor that they really prefer, which is the Northwest Area Corridor, these are opportunities for us. And so who knows, maybe there will be some federal funding that might become available for these projects. And you know, I think everyone across the whole country, as it relates to transportation, is looking for these unique opportunities and partnerships and things that we can do to think differently than we've ever thought before, right? So I think there are some opportunities. And so that's what staff will be doing, is coming back to the board soon with some thoughts and recommendations on what the potential next steps could be. And, you know, again, I think what's interesting, and I've been around a while like some of you guys, and so we've been through the trenches on all of this, right? And, you know, the challenges of fast tracks, and, you know, how we've worked on the Northwest Area Mobility Study and public-private partnerships and all these things that we collectively have done to keep fast tracks moving forward, and much of it completed because of those thoughtful things that we all did together. But when Deborah has been asked very openly and transparently about what she thinks about Northwest Rail, I think what everybody has to remember is that this was somebody coming in here with a fresh set of ears and eyes as a transit, highly knowledgeable professional, giving her first blush feelings about what she was seeing, knowing and saying from the beginning that she needs to have more information. She's here to listen, and she wants to work with stakeholders. And that continues to be where she's at. But again, I think I'm going to always look at the positive part of this, which is this now has opened up the opportunity for us to have open dialogue and think about what those partnership opportunities could be. So I think that's a good thing, personally. I don't know if anybody else has any comments or questions.
Anyone else have comments or questions about either the Accountability Committee or the governor's statement and regarding Northwest Rail?
Well, I've got a couple. Pauletta, you're wonderfully tactful, but that's your job.
That's my job.
So at the risk of being recalled from my new co-chair position, all I can say to Deborah is bravo. You know, somebody basically said the emperor has no clothes, and that's what you need to say once in a while. I still think what RTD needs to do, and after all these years still does not do, which makes me crazy, is provide a lot more transparency and analysis on cost per ride, including capital, amortized capital, around the system, and maybe cost per mile as well. They do a little bit of it, but mostly it's impossible to get that information. And I'll just say quickly, you don't instantly decide, well, you're only going to do the more cost-effective routes and toss out the less cost-effective routes. That's unfair. There's lots of reasons you choose one route or another, including who it serves and what the alternatives are, and so on and so on. But I think you have to have some basis for at least starting a conversation. And unfortunately for Northwest Rail, which sure I would love to see, if you do the math, you end up with ride subsidies, and this is not a misstatement of $100 a ride or $150 a ride. And crazy. You can't conceivably justify that. Maybe a partnership with Amtrak will work. I don't know. It's worth looking at. Why not? But that's just the reality of the situation. And I think some of that would change the conversation and make it a little more practical. I just wish RTD would do that. I don't know why they essentially refuse to do that and have refused to do that for as long as I have been dealing with them. And again, I think you need to include capital, which makes the rail lines kind of expensive too, but so be it. Let's see what the numbers are. I think it's a starting point. So that's one long comment about that. Only other thing I'd say is everybody should look at the Accountability Committee draft report. It's really interesting. They are looking at the right stuff, but you'll very quickly determine that they don't have any answers whatsoever. They get stuck on all the same problems that everybody gets stuck on because they're hard to solve. So they look at things like regional councils, and maybe that's a great idea. And then they instantly get stuck on, so how do you do that equitably? And how do you divvy up the revenue? And what's fair? And I have no idea what's fair. I have no idea how you do any of that, and neither do they. And then they also come up with a metric of, I mean, these are just two that struck me very quickly, a way to really measure RTD's success and changing this in the legislation and looking at essentially the cost of ridership. You know, how many people are you serving and what is it costing you? That's great, but paradoxically, if that's your metric, that may mean that you're not serving the people who need it the most, who are not always the most cost effective to serve. So yeah, they've kind of hit on the problems. Whether they'll come up with any solutions, I don't know. I'm just really afraid, honestly, they'll come up with simplistic solutions of, well, RTD, you need to simultaneously serve all these people who need serving, and you have to do it in the most cost-effective way with the highest ridership. Go to it. It turns out that's not really possible. You have to make tough decisions. So I think everybody should look at it, and we should really stay abreast of what they're up to. Because I still remain afraid they're gonna kind of beat up RTD and not be willing to take on the tough issues themselves.
I'd like to, since I raised the issue of Governor Polis's comments about the Northwest Rail, I agree with you 100%, Matt. And it just really struck me as grandstanding on his part. I mean, anybody that, you know, spends 30 seconds on this issue understands there's a huge ridership issue related to it. And so I just found his approach to be not very constructive, and coming at a time when RTD's under, you know, tremendous pressure just to deal with COVID and basic operational issues. So yeah, I appreciate your comments, Matt, and Pauletta too. I really appreciate your comments. It puts RTD in a really, really difficult place, in my opinion.
This is Heather. You know, I wonder if RTD approaches this differently, and I'm curious why there is a demand for the rail. And I'll give you my perspective. I work downtown and I live in Broomfield, and I've traveled that route up until this year daily on an RTD bus for 20 years. And I literally will retire, I hope, before there's a rail. And here's my perspective. I have a friend who lives equal distance from downtown but south. And to see him, I have to take the train, which is double the time that my bus takes, because the train has to stop at every stop. But my bus picks me up at Civic Center Station and drops me off at Broomfield, and that's the first stop. There's way more flexibility in buses than there are trains. And I keep wondering, why is it people want a train? Is it that they're afraid to take a bus? Is there a stigma with a bus, especially in the suburbanites? But the Flatiron Flyer is remarkable. And the fact that you can take it from Union Station or Civic Center Station, and then it goes various places in Boulder, should be highlighted. And I would put people on the spot and ask them why the train would be better than what we have.
But, I'm not putting him on the spot because I chatted to make sure he wanted me to weigh in, but we do have Director Davidson from up in that district. And I thought, want to welcome him for attending his first CAC meeting and give him an opportunity. He's not on video, but I think is going to come on and talk to us a little bit about this.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for the introduction. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I apologize that I'm not in a good spot for video. I typically like to be, but we're all having to be a little mobile and different these days. But it's great to meet you all. My name is Eric, and I represent District I, which is Longmont and Broomfield, Lafayette, part of Thornton, and some of the unincorporated Boulder and Adams County. And this Northwest Rail issue certainly has gotten a lot of attention recently. I'm fairly new to the job. I was sworn in on January 5th. And I'll be honest, I didn't expect for the rail to be dominating a lot of the conversation right now, given that we're still in the throes of a tragic global pandemic. But in many ways, it is a good time for RTD to be looking at our future and looking at how we best move people and how we best serve our customers as we do recover from crisis. I think as it relates to rail, one of the things that I know that I need to work on within the district, and then within the regional transportation district at large, is this issue of trust. For a lot of people in the Northwest, sometimes the conversation isn't even just about rail. It's about the fact that these communities have been planning for the project, and that they have felt like the conversation has been postponed. And take, for example, the Flatiron Flyer comment. Heather, thank you for bringing that up. I completely agree. It's a wonderful, wonderful line, and I'm so glad that it has been so popular. But that's a perfect example of where, some people have raised questions to me, why the Flatiron Flyer is largely on track to meet its ridership projections that were outlined in 2004, but the ridership projections for rail have since been cut. And, for communities that aren't connected to the Flatiron Flyer, that's been a question that continually comes up. So I think if nothing else, we have at RTD, the challenge in front of us, I think, for the next couple months is to communicate very openly and to engage the community in the conversation. Because I think a lot of folks that I meet with, just in our neighborhoods, in our communities, just feel like they haven't had access to all of the information. And so I think the study session that we had last week that the governor did show up at was a good first step to starting to have that conversation. So, I certainly don't have any answers. I know, Matt, you brought up the idea of Amtrak. I certainly am hopeful that we can look for partnership opportunities. Whether or not Amtrak will get its federal funding and be part of an infrastructure bill is a question that I'm sure none of us here can answer or get the crystal ball out for. But should they get that money, it would make a lot of sense for RTD to be an operational partner along that line. And the ridership projections change in a big way if we look at connecting Pueblo to Fort Collins. and not just throughout the RTD district. So anyway, I don't think, any of us have the answers right now. The phase that we're going into is getting as many answers as we can, updating ridership numbers, updating environmental information, and working with the community and talking to the community about what its needs and goals are. And that's certainly my focus right now, is engaging in that conversation, getting all the information brought to the surface and making sure everybody has access to it. And from there, we'll see what we see what we can do.
Thank you, Director.
Yeah,
Other
thank you for having me.
comments, feedback, thoughts before we wrap up? Good discussion here. This is going to be an issue that's going to continue to be, I mean, it has been discussed over the last 12 years, really, 13 years since the 2008 downturn, is the challenges of finishing some of these corridors, but it's definitely top of mind again now. And I do think it's an interesting in the context of the COVID pandemic and impacts on ridership that we're seeing, and how commuter patterns are changing, and how that's all going to bounce back or not bounce back or whatever. So
Hey,
fascinating.
Roger. Hey,
Yeah.
Roger. Pauletta here. This is something that I'm just going to offer up, because this is something a stakeholder said. I got a phone call last week from an outside stakeholder who has been around a long time, knows all about the whole fast track story. And the person said, and I just think this was interesting, that the person said, yes, RTD committed to Northwest Rail through fast tracks, but not at any cost. And I thought that was a very interesting perspective from somebody who's on the sidelines, because the original cost estimate for Northwest Rail was somewhere in the neighborhood of, I want to say, like $565 million. And granted, as I always try to remind everybody, is when you put these cost estimates together for these mega infrastructure programs, you put the information together with the best available information you have at the time, right? Then fast tracks passed, and then, like all the other infrastructure projects across the country, a lot of things change. You have, in the case of fast tracks, you have cost escalation that, the cost of construction materials went through the roof. Sales tax revenues plummeted during the Great Recession. You had scope changes. You had technology changes with some of the rail lines. You have station changes from one location to another. You have, alignment changes, and all of these things cost money, and all of these things impact the bottom line, right? And this happens in, like I said, all these mega programs. But I thought that was a very insightful comment that the person made. Yes, you expect that there will be increased costs, and that some of these projects you're going to see adjustments that need to be made. But the promise wasn't for at any cost, right? That's the rub that I think we just have to think about is, when we're talking about public tax dollars, how do we best utilize those as a region, right? And that's not an editorial comment. It's just a factor that I've heard from other outside stakeholders. And so it will be a great open dialogue moving forward, I believe.
All right, Matt and Joanna, as co-chairs, other topics, comments for the good of the order, questions for any of our directors or staff that are here?
I guess I have to unmute. I'm good for now. Looking forward to working with Matt, and we'll get together before the next meeting and see where we're headed. And thank you, everybody, for attending today. I think there's a lot of exciting things going on. Definitely, we all need to read the accountability report so we can be better prepared to make other comments on that. And thank you, Pauletta, for
anyone else
today, and Lindsay too.
I know I'm not a committee chair, but I just want to echo what I put in the chat. I think it's great that the directors are here to hear more of these types of conversations. So if you guys are ever interested in putting it out to other board members, I think it's great to have more of you here so that you can be a part of these discussions a little bit more.
I think we're part of the listening session right now. Guys, do not want to get me started.
That voice from above. Director Williams. You know, I have expressed to board members as I'm talking to them that, you know, they're welcome to attend and listen in. And we also are in April, I did included in my last report to the board that we would be doing breakout rooms and dedicating a good portion of the April meeting to kind of round robins in the smaller rooms to allow just for some discussion, since we're not able to do kind of our lunch and breakfast one-on-ones that we have done historically at the first of each year. So they are aware of that. We'll continue to promote that to the board, to board members, and I would expect that we'll have a good bit of turnout for that.
I would just say, this is Eric Davidson again, and I just would say thank you so much for opening this up. It is awesome, and this is the first time I've had the opportunity to attend, and I certainly will share the word with fellow board directors. This was awesome. Thank you.
All right. Well, everyone stay warm and healthy, and get your vaccinations when you can, and we'll see everyone next month.
Thanks, Roger.
All right, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.